Good morning. Welcome, everyone. Good morning to everybody. Good morning to anybody that might be to the west. Good afternoon to those of us on the East Coast. Welcome to today's program. For those of you maybe don't know of DRW, we are a research and evidence-based coaching firm, and we kicked off our series on the research of gratitude in September. We celebrated World Gratitude Day, September 21st, every year, so mark that on your calendar for next year. And then in October, we took a look at the positive impact gratitude has on employee engagement. And today, we're going to be talking about the health and well-being benefits of gratitude. On the phone or on the webinar with us is Jen, who is our support guru. If you have any technical difficulties, she will monitor the chat box and let you know how to remedy that. And of course, excited as can be to have our guest presenter today, Dr. Z. Colette Edwards. Dr. Edwards is the National Medical Director, Associate Health and Wellbeing at Humana. Her focus is on the health and well-being of Humana associates, and that includes strategy, program design and implementation, and internal consulting. Dr. Edwards is also the managing editor of the Wharton Healthcare Quarterly and the author of the book, Be Less Stressed. And I'll talk more about that book towards the end of the webinar. Quickly through our objectives, we will be exploring gratitude's impact on health and well-being. We'll take a look at some personal practice techniques. We'll go into the link between well-being programs and employee benefits. We've got some great relevant resources and Q&A. And we'll try to keep the Q&A to the end of the webinar. But Jen, if you see a question that you think is really pertinent to the current conversation, please let us know. And as a frame of reference, you'll hear us use the terms gratitude, recognition, appreciation interchangeably today. And know that what comes first is the state of being grateful, and that is followed by recognition and appreciation. As we normally do with all of our webinars, we ask you to consider a question and jot down your answers in the chat, your questions in the chat box. Today's question is, what else would you like to know about gratitude in the workplace? And I just came across an article this morning that talks about the concerns and the myths of gratitude in the workplace. So we'll make sure that you get a link to that article after today. Goes without saying how honored and thrilled and, yes, grateful we are to have Dr. Edwards as a guest on today's webinar. We're excited to hear from you about the topic of well-being, so please join me in welcoming Dr. Edwards.
Thank you so much, Linda, and I really appreciate this invitation. I'm excited to have the opportunity to discuss gratitude today. And I have titled my section as The Gift That Keeps On Giving, and hopefully by the end of my section, you'll understand why I have that title. Just wanted to give you a brief snapshot about Humana, because depending upon where you are located, you may know very, very little about Humana. I am in Maryland, and I knew very little about Humana myself before I was recruited, and Humana has very little presence in Maryland, but other people may know a little bit more. But just to give you a quick overview. So it is a healthcare company that offers a wide range of insurance products and health and wellness services. It also has direct care delivery practices. It was founded in 1961 and actually has a very interesting history in that there were two attorneys in Louisville, which is where the headquarters are, and they had family members that then needed what we would call skilled nursing care, which really didn't exist at that time. And so, at least not in Louisville. And so they then decided that they were going to get into skilled nursing to address that need, and eventually owned hospitals, and then eventually sold the nursing facilities and the hospitals and became more focused on insurance and evolved now into a health services company. Like I said, it's headquartered in Kentucky. I am work at home in Maryland, and I've been at Humana it'll be 4 years in March. It's a Fortune 100 company. The major area of focus is Medicare, where the company has 30 years of experience. It has about 3 million members in Medicare Advantage plans, 14 million medical members across the country, and 6.9 million members in specialty products. So just to set the context. And then in terms of the associate population, and in Humana lingo, associates are employees, at this point it is at about 50,000. The company, as it has evolved over time, has had a very heavy-duty focus on associate health and well-being, and has been recognized in the industry going back several years. And this focus on associate health and well-being has also served to be serves as attraction in terms of recruitment of associates, and also is a reason that people tend to stay, I think, longer than average, at least in terms of the numbers of people that I come in contact with in other companies, potentially. So going back to 2014, every single year, Humana has been a Platinum Award winner in the National Business Group on Health program, and they recognize employers who take a holistic approach to well-being, and that they're looking at financial, emotional, social, and community well-being, and not just physical health. This year, Humana was named number 3 out of 100 of the healthiest employers. That's something that recognizes employers who are focused on corporate wellness and population health, and it's conducted in over 45 US cities. And then with regard to the American Heart Association Gold status, companies are judged in 7 areas, which are leadership, engagement, programs, policies and environment, partnerships, communications, and reporting outcomes. So just a little bit of history about Humana. At Humana, well-being is looked at holistically. So these are the 4 big domains. So purpose, health, security, and belonging. And you can see how those are defined within Humana. It really is a whole person view. And besides the focus on well-being, the focus on engagement, as well as the associate experience. And Humana as a company, when Bruce Broussard joined the organization as CEO, kind of laid down the gauntlet that for the general membership, our goal was going to be to improve the health of the communities we serve by 20% by 2020, and for the associates to hit that same 20% improvement by 2017. And Humana has activity in 7 communities that are called Bold Goal communities, where it really is a partnership, a liaison, bringing together parties in a multidisciplinary way to focus on the health of a community, and more broadly than just Humana members. On the next slide, just some of the results and the impact of some of our efforts, and having a focus on well-being. So having this focus on well-being has resulted in a more engaged associate population, and when it's compared across the industry, tends to be higher and greater than the 90th percentile. And employees who have this focus on well-being are 3 times less likely to look for another job. They are 3 times less likely to have missing days. They're 3 times less stressed, and they also are lower in unhealthy days. And healthy days is a measure by the CDC, and it looks at over a 30-day period. It asks questions related to your physical health and your mental health and how it's impacting your life. You can also see the tremendous impact that purpose can have. And it may seem a little bit weird to talk about purpose within the workplace, but it definitely has an impact, as you can see, in terms of your health. And on the next slide, we're going to begin some fun here. So let's go with image number 1. And if you can put in the chat function what you see when you look at image number 1, the first thing that comes to mind, don't overthink it. Let me see some.
2 faces, a vase.
Okay.
2
and now
faces.
let's go to image number 2. Hopefully a few more people will also jump in. Don't overthink it. Just put down the first thing that you see.
Ah, a penguin and Abe Lincoln.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. And so the point that I want to make on this slide, and by the way, when I have done this with other people on image number 1, so what people have seen in these 2 images are what people have seen when I've done this before. There is an additional image that some people have seen with image number 1, where to them it looks like a chandelier. And so the point that I want to make is that what we see is often a matter of our perspective, and that may be impacted by our beliefs, our worldview, our culture, our emotional state and stress level at the time, the context of a particular circumstance, and the amount of time that we have available. It can also change over time and be impacted by things like your personal circumstances, external events, your education level, and interaction with others. And an example that I will give that has always stood out in my mind, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with the movie Terms of Endearment with Jack Nicholson, Deborah Winger, and Shirley MacLaine. But Shirley MacLaine and Deborah Winger are mother and daughter, and at one point in the movie, they are interacting, and the daughter has become ill, and she's in the hospital, and they're having a conversation, and a more real conversation than they may have had in the past. And the daughter says to, Deborah Winger says to Shirley MacLaine, "I just don't want to fight with you anymore." And Shirley MacLaine, sorry, I'm screwing up the story. Shirley MacLaine says to Deborah Winger, "I just don't want to fight with you anymore." And then Deborah Winger says to Shirley MacLaine, "We don't fight. We've never fought." And you have 2 people who are engaged with only each other, and they had a very different view. One thought they were fighting all the time, and the other one thought they were not fighting at all, but they were just having lively exchanges, shall we say. Mm-hmm. So I think we've all had a circumstance where people may all be in the same room hearing the same thing, and if you ask people as they're coming out, well, what happened, you may hear a very different story. And this whole idea of perspective will be made more relevant as time goes on.
Good point.
So on the next page, how do you feel? If you can let us know in the chat function, is your mind full or do you feel mindful? And how are you today? How have you been over the past 30 days? And how would you say you've been on average in 2017?
Mostly mindful. Try to be mindful every day.
Okay.
Mostly mindful. Try to be mindful. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, so once again, this is another scenario that's impacted by factors such as your personal circumstances, external events, your belief system, your degree of awareness, your personal growth and training, how much control you feel you have, your stress level, your priorities, and how much clutter you have in your life, both physical as well as mental. But something that ultimately, if you pay attention, you have some degree of control, and over time, you can fall more into the mindful bucket as opposed to the mindful bucket. So on the next slide, and hopefully a lot of people will respond, what's your definition of gratitude? Don't be shy. There are no wrong answers.
Great heartfelt thankfulness.
Okay, so let's see what Merriam-Webster has as its definition. Okay, so appreciative of benefits received, affording pleasure or contentment, pleasing by reason of comfort supplied or discomfort alleviated. So I think what's important to take away from this is in terms of, it could be the presence of something positive or the absence of something negative, as well as you get a sense of potentially kind of a two-way street, if you will, which hopefully will become clear in the following slides. So on the next slide, in terms of views of gratitude, so which one are you, half full, half empty? And if you look at the literature,
I'm sorry.
If you look at the literature, it would tell you that, at least for many people, on average, there are people who tend to be half full people, and there are people who tend to be half empty people. And you kind of, you kind of start off that way. But the important point to realize is that if you're a half empty person, there are things that you can do to evolve over time, so that even though you may, at your root be more of a half empty person, you may become your glass may fill up some more. I also believe that in a given circumstance, you may be having this internal battle as whether or not it's half full or half empty. So depending upon the circumstance, you may or not be able to see the silver lining in a negative situation. And I think that in reality, it's an and, not an or. And it's also circumstantial. So you may find times when you view certain things, or given the context, that it's a half full glass, and at other times a half empty glass. If you are in an objectively bad situation and you're stressed or depressed, it's going to be a little bit harder for you to view life as a half full glass, even if you're a half full person. And if you're a half empty person, it's going to be much easier to further reinforce that view. On the other hand, there are people who aren't really having this internal conflict at all. They're just moving on with life. And you can see this quote, that they aren't getting into the debate while everybody around us is trying to figure it out. They are just moving on and taking action. And so what the literature around gratitude would say is, in reality, it doesn't necessarily matter. Number one, gratitude would tell you to be thankful that you have a glass, and be thankful that you have at least something in it. And over time, as you practice gratitude and start to reap its benefits, you will eventually realize that the glass, you not only have a glass, that there's already something in it, but it can be refilled. And on the next slide, this is kind of how I view gratitude in a way, where there can be, this is kind of that struggle, and it may be different on a given day, or different just on average, depending upon whether you're a half full or half empty person. So your brain is the logic and reason, and your heart is more about emotion and faith, and the element of your gut instinct, and both are equally valid, but they may be in battle with each other. And as you practice gratitude, you get more of a balance and then eventually a melding so that you're able to release the struggle and see that they can coexist in harmony. So a mind meld, if you will. So one last time that we're going to ask you a question to participate. What do you think the potential impact or impacts are of practicing gratitude and recognizing things in your life for which you are grateful? Anybody with thoughts?
Yeah, happiness, more positivity, calmness.
Okay, anything else?
Less stress. Happiness and increased sleep quality. Yay.
Okay. So all of those answers are right. And maybe we can, Linda, we don't even have to go on because these are experts already. But when you look at the literature, people can experience an improvement in both their physical as well as their mental and emotional health, an increased ability to keep perspective, an increased ability to stay in the present and notice the positives and little joys in life. And when you do any degree of investigation around mindfulness, what you will learn around the power of being in the present and the power of now, so that even if, let's say, you're having a really bad day, if you stay in a particular moment and just focus on that moment while you're in it, as opposed to thinking about the one before or the one that's coming, any individual moment is probably going to be okay, even though over the course of the day or the course of the month, it may be less than ideal. You will have less suffering if you aren't constantly thinking about the past or worrying about the future and resisting what's going on and just accepting it. Gratitude also helps you improve your connections and relationships with others, because you not only become more grateful for them and you perceive them in a particular way, but then if you then communicate your feelings to them, you kind of get into a virtuous cycle. Gratitude has been shown to reduce stress and increase your ability to build resilience. And it also can help you clarify your values and prioritize what you really think is important. Because if you're really paying attention to what's going on and what's really, and being really present, then you start to notice that you may be spending a lot of time on things that really are not what you want to do, or really are not aligned with your values, or really are not aligned with your goals in life, and really don't need to be done, and that you are not, the balance between those things and the things who really represent who you are is off balance. And gratitude will help you laser in and create balance. It also helps you empathize and also have compassion for yourself. So the next several slides you'll see where the information was drawn from Linda's article on the neuroscience of gratitude and the Wharton Healthcare Quarterly. So a couple of things about your brain and some of the chemicals that are swirling around in your body. So dopamine is one of those things that makes you feel good. It creates positive emotions. It makes you more optimistic. And as a result of that, you engage in more pro-social behaviors. It's also been linked to goal accomplishment and intrinsic motivation. Serotonin will also enhance your mood and impacts and has the result that you would get from an antidepressant. It also can increase your willpower and focus your motivation. So the good news around gratitude in your brain is that there's something that's called neuroplasticity. So it used to be thought that your brain cells were your brain cells, and at a certain point they were locked in. Science has told us that your brain is capable of rewiring, building new pathways, and that, for example, that knowledge is taken advantage of in working with patients with strokes. And it really comes into play with regard to if you are under stress, where the pathways that will lead you to not have as much clarity and perspective, and the areas that will lead you to have more emotion that's not helpful. So the size of your cells that are executive function and judgment shrink, and the size that will increase your emotions kind of out of proportion to the situation grow. But it's something that actually, when you look at MRIs that are functional and look at how your brain lights up, practicing gratitude literally can rewire your brain and change the size of certain parts of your brain. And some of that starts with, if you start thinking differently and using gratitude, that retrains your mind. And then when you retrain your mind, then you're able to retrain your brain and get those changes that I talked about. So other potential impacts, when you look at the literature, and I've listed all the journals where this comes from. So when this has been studied, practicing gratitude has increased resiliency to suicide. There's lower stress and depression, higher levels of social support because people tend to be more interactive with others, lower rates of PTSD, for example. Gratitude and mindfulness are definitely areas that the U.S. military have been leveraging, most recently with the veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan. Other studies in terms of your health, gratitude may impact the factors that are looked at with regard to your cardiovascular health, may lower your levels of inflammation, and inflammation is kind of the trigger for all sorts of things like cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, diabetes, for example. People who practice gratitude on a regular basis have fewer health complaints. Some of that may be because of the perspective that they have, but it's also that they tend to engage in healthier behavior. So they're exercising more, they're eating better, so their health actually is better, so they have fewer health complaints. And then, as someone had noted in the chat function, it does, for many people, have the positive impact on sleep, both in terms of quality and the amount of time that you get. And I think that we all suffer from too much time that's lost not getting good sleep. It also lowers your level of stress hormones, and it has this impact that's kind of back and forth in the interaction with others in terms of when you pass on your feelings of gratitude as it relates to others, then they feel more socially valued, and then they get the positive, and then it's kind of paying it forward, and the environment and the energy changes. On the next slide, just coming back to this idea of keeping things in perspective. So we're all aware of recent tragic scenarios happening in the US, the fires in California, Hurricane Maria, where the people in Puerto Rico still don't have water and still don't have electricity, the shooting in Las Vegas. And so when you're going through one of those days where it's maybe a really horrible day, you know, this quote really struck me in terms of there are people who would love to have your bad day. And so everything, once again, is a matter of perspective. I will say that the literature shows that gratitude is not about comparing your life to someone else. The comparison is more about the relativity factor and reminding yourself of what you have, and that you get a greater impact when you practice gratitude, when you, in addition to recognizing what you're grateful for, you say to yourself or write down for yourself why you are grateful for that particular thing. So if you say that you are grateful for your parents, taking it a step further and saying, I'm grateful for my parents because they loved me, they took care of me, they are always there for me. No one's going to love me like my parents ever did. Taking that next step will give you an extra benefit from gratitude than just listing that you're grateful for your parents, although you will derive benefit from the recognition of that gratitude. So then we're going to get into how do you practice gratitude. So a few things here. So some people will do a list, and here's some triggers and sentences that you could use if you aren't practicing it now, or you're just on the early stages of thinking about it. Some people just have kind of a mantra that they speak, like the one in the middle. And then there are people who will do things like a gratitude jar and then go back at the end of 3 months or the end of the year and start pulling things out as a reminder. And I know, Linda, I know that you may have shared before, but kind of how your family got into gratitude and some of the practices that you think might be helpful.
Right. Thanks, Dr. Edwards. We put a whiteboard up on our island in the kitchen, and we wrote out, I am grateful for ... And very quickly, the kids would come over, my husband would walk in, we would jot down whatever was present in our mind at the moment, and expressed our gratitude for that. So it very quickly filled up, and it's actually turned into a gift idea that we now give all of our family relatives, so they can practice the same. You know, Dr. Edwards, there's also a great quote by Lois Hay, who said, the more grateful I feel, the more aware I am that the supply is endless. And so that count your blessings is a perfect way to kind of frame that quote.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So this next slide ties into what Linda was just saying in terms of, in tying together this whole idea about perspective. So enjoying the little things in life, because one day you'll look back and realize they were the big things. And I think when you look at the literature, it seems that as people are older, they recognize the wisdom of this. And so the trick is, how can you get to that faster? So all along the way, you're noticing the little things and really paying attention to them and getting the full benefit of them, as opposed to some other things that may be sexier or more distracting at the time. This matter of perspective, I still remember the days I prayed for what I have now. So people can easily get, and you know, so totally understandable, get into this quest of, if I could only X, then I would be happy and life would be wonderful. And then when they get to that, then they're on to the next quest. Well, this is pretty good, but if only I could X, and not take the time to recognize what they have, that it is good, and this is what they wanted, and they actually have it. And then this other quote about happiness is letting go of what you think your life is supposed to look like and celebrating it for everything that it is. And there are some that will say that a lot of the suffering that we do is this comparison of, my life is this way, but it should be that way. This person should be acting that way. And at some point, I think we all have a recognition, and it may be a painful lesson to learn, and it may take a long time to recognize it in a given situation or with a given person. But if you're lucky, you come to the realization that you can control yourself and you can potentially influence others, but they have control of themselves. And so things are the way that they are, and struggling against the reality doesn't change it in terms of resisting it and wanting the reality to be different, which does not mean that you then don't take action to change things, but sitting and just railing against it without taking action then becomes a very stressful, suffering cycle, if you will. And let me see where we gonna speed it up, Linda, to make sure you are able to get to your slides.
Okay.
So another part of practicing gratitude is paying attention. So a couple of quotes I pulled here about life is a series of thousands of tiny miracles. Notice them. and enjoy the little things, and then never let the things you want make you forget the things you have. So a kind of a recurring theme. Another way to practice gratitude, I think, is, you know, there are people who really have a great experience kind of communing with nature, and that we know has an impact in terms of your stress levels, immunity levels, etc. But I think you can take a gratitude vacation. I mean, I pulled this from a website. To me, this is absolutely gorgeous. This is a real place. It's not a made-up place. It exists in the world. So you can just imagine yourself that you are some beautiful place and be grateful that it exists somewhere in the world. And you may actually be able to travel there beyond it just in your mind. A few more practices, journaling. And Linda, I know that you have a gratitude journal that's available. Would you like to make any comments about the benefits of journaling?
Yeah, the journal is about to come out. The evidence, you've started to talk about this. The evidence shows that the benefit from journaling comes from being as specific as we can. So yes, thank you for my parents, but what was it that they gave us? How did we benefit from that? What did they possibly give up? So when we get to that level of specificity is where we're really creating new neural pathways that allow us to see, to live gratefully, as I like to say. And you know, sometimes people get in a rut and they think, I don't know what else I should write. I've written everything I'm grateful for. That's a time to kind of switch to what's a concept that gives us a feeling of gratitude. Is it nature? Is it peace? Is it love or tranquility? But the greater detail that we put into it, the greater benefits we get from the journaling itself.
Okay, thanks. So this next slide, be kind to yourself and others. And so this one really struck me, this quote: do something today that your future self will thank you for. So kind of planning for your future gratitude. And I think for me, it had an impact from the standpoint of, on a day I may not be motivated to exercise like I should, or on a day where I want to eat all that food that's not good for me. You know, sometimes I'm going to give into that feeling, but sometimes this quote will stop me and say, you know, what I'm doing now, 5 years from now, I'm going to be really happy that I chose not to do it. So planning for your future list of things to be grateful for. And then another activity in terms of not saying anything negative for 24 hours. So I think that changes the energy within yourself, the energy around you. It will change the dynamic and the way that you interact with other people. It will also potentially impact the filtering that can go on when you look at other people and other situations, because you're starting from a neutral place as opposed to a place that you've already labeled, and then you interpret what you see along with the label that you've already given the situation or the person.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. We encourage people when they write emails to exclude words like not or never or couldn't or shouldn't. So I love that quote right there, Doctor. It was very powerful.
Then on the theme of kind of a gift to yourself, and this is something that also people had said in the chat in terms of a calmness, a quiet joy, and gratitude helping you to see what you have as opposed to what you don't have, and keeping you grounded in the present. And then on the next slide, I thought this was kind of a nice summary. It doesn't necessarily get into all of the kind of the physical health impacts, but gratitude makes sense of our past, brings peace for today, and creates a vision for tomorrow. So for me, that kind of sums things up in an overall package. And on the next slide, because I know we want to talk about, you know, gratitude, not just at the individual practice level, but how as an employer you can practice gratitude. So just to give you a few examples. So when I was at another company, and I was the chief medical officer for a 4-state region, I set up a program where people would send comments to me, positive recognition, or this whole theory about catching people doing something great. And it could be, you could send it about your manager could send it about you, and people could send it about your peers. And so we would collect it and celebrate it each month. And there was an admin who was very skilled in PowerPoint, and so we would have a theme, and it would be a lot of fun. Like one of the times that she did it, it was all based around the email was going to go out around the time of when the Oscars are every year. So it had an Oscar awards theme to it. So it was really fun. People really loved it. They felt good when they were recognized. They felt good recognizing other people. And when I first started doing it, it took a lot of time on her part to do it, even though she loved it. And so at that time, at least in Outlook, you could set your message to see, are people really opening this? So I had set it to see, is anyone really paying attention? We're putting a lot of thought into this and a lot of work into this, but does anyone really care? Well, you could see instantly, as soon as that went out, it was just like instant opening. And it was the kind of thing where people really looked forward to getting that each month. And it really kind of changed or enhanced the environment on the team. Humana has something called the Star Awards, and that is where people are given special thanks and recognition in the form of cash with regard to ideas they may have that make a significant contribution to the business, and you can get an award that's up to $5,000. There's also a Summit Reward, and it's all about recognizing people who are providing and kind of go above and beyond in terms of their interactions with others and the type of experience that people have when they interact with them, particularly our members. And then just the little things where, for someone who may report to you or your colleagues, there's a way to send in the system a happy birthday, or to recognize the number of years they've done at the company, or if you know that they've had a baby, or that they've accomplished one of their goals, little notes that you can send to them in the system to recognize them along the way. That makes, kind of sends the message that I see you as a person, I know you as a person, I know these things bring you joy, and boy, are you awesome. Right. So just wanted to give you some examples, real life examples from an employer perspective. The next 2 slides are simply some resources for your consideration. And Linda, I am going to now turn it back to you. And I know that we're going to take questions at the end.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Edwards, and really appreciate so much from your insights, your practice techniques, and the resources. We thought a natural flow would be to look at the link between well-being, how our employees benefits, how that supports employee engagement, and then obviously the employer benefits as well. And being close to the season of Thanksgiving, I guess we're in the season. 2 weeks from tomorrow is Thanksgiving, so buy your turkeys. We looked at this study that was published in the Journal of Positive Psychology, and they looked at the 3 weeks around Thanksgiving and started to track gratitude, positive effect, life satisfaction tweets. And so what's interesting here as we look at this is that before and after that one day a year, we're relatively flat. When the researchers actually took the Thanksgiving Day tweets, they saw how the negative effects jumped up, and the satisfaction with life and the meaningful of life tweets plummeted. So even shopping wasn't giving us a good tweet at that point. Dr. Edwards, thank you for sharing the holistic view that Humana has on well-being. Actually, it's even more than what the World Health Organization states, that health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, not merely an absence of disease. We thought it would be interesting to look at these key elements of well-being and how they align so well with the research in gratitude, and some of it, thank you, Dr. Edwards, you've already tapped into. When we think of physical well-being, the ability for us to do what we need to do physically at work and at home, we know that the research shows that we take better care of ourselves. As the chat box talked about, we sleep better. Our blood pressure is lowered, lower depressive symptoms. We actually are able to strengthen our immune system. When we look at social well-being, that's where we start looking at the work and life balance at work and at home. That's why social activities such as company picnics or retreats are so important. We actually have a team right now that's setting up a date to go to one of these escape rooms in Baltimore to have that social interaction with each other. And Dr. Edwards, you captured the pro-social behaviors, the ability of gratitude to foster positive relationships and actually reduce the less desirable behaviors that we might see in some of our team interactions. And also the emotional well-being. So we know from the research, we cannot be angry and grateful at the same time. So gratitude blocks those toxic emotions. Key drivers of well-being. From the research, the top driver was values, being aligned with our values, really seeing those ethical behaviors. Dr. Edwards, you mentioned the impact of gratitude on our ability to clarify our values, really, really important as a driver of well-being. Teamwork, the ability to create resilience or to recognize the stress factors. Taking a look at our work environment and the processes that we work within. And of course, recognition being a key driver. When employees feel recognized and appreciated, the research shows that there's a more positive effect on their overall well-being. It strengthens the culture of recognition and it reinforces each other. Frequency of recognition. From the research, we know that the frequency has a larger impact on employee well-being, and that there's and these effects carry on over time, so that we have stronger positive effects on our well-being. A stronger culture of recognition, the more our employees' well-being improves, and the more this translates into having productive teams. Some of the research that we talked about in October was that the 3 ways of defining recognition in the workplace. One is the act of recognizing, one is observing, and the other is giving. And so with those 3 areas, we're now able to make a greater impact on employee well-being and employee engagement. In fact, one of the later studies shows peer-to-peer recognition has a tremendous impact on overall well-being and engagement. Employees who feel appreciated and are appreciated often have that higher well-being both inside and outside of work, very important with work-life balance. Similarly, studies look at more frequent, genuine, and individualized recognition gives us that greater job satisfaction, that commitment, and that motivation to accomplish our organizational goals. And that's where serotonin would come in with that willpower and that motivation to help achieve those goals. And from a performance perspective, research from Gallup refers to high engagement and high well-being as 2 major factors that influence performance. So Gallup suggests that leaders that make a substantial difference in their employees' lives include well-being principles as part of their company's engagement programs. They also recognize that where you have high engagement, high well-being, employees are more likely to report an excellent performance of their organization. They're able to deal with change better. So successful well-being programs come from engaged employees, and by all means, We should solicit our employees' ideas about what parts of the well-being programs they find most beneficial. Engaged employees find that they share more of their well-being goals with their managers, and caring managers show concern for employees by asking them about their well-being goals and objectives. Again, some of the same resources that we have. And because we just turned our clocks back and we have Halloween around the corner, we thought might be good to remind you to set your scales back 10 pounds tonight. We actually found some trivia about the number of calories that people consume on average on Thanksgiving is 4,500 calories. And of that, 229 grams of fat. So definitely turn those scales back before you have that Thanksgiving dinner. So I want to open up the chat box now, and please let's see if there's any questions that you have for Dr. Edwards, or comments from the presentation today. Anybody want to add anything to the chat box? Thank you very much. That's great. You know, one of the things that I thought about as far as using gratitude around the holiday time is to think back to a family or a Thanksgiving ritual that you had growing up. Maybe you still have it today, and journal about the benefits of those rituals. What did you receive? What was the concepts that always made it a special time to get together? How do you practice gratitude now? Yeah, I'll speak for myself. I have a ritual of every Friday morning I have a journal. I separate some time from the calendar so that I have the ability to reflect. We have an acronym called Gratitude Maps, and that acronym stands for having that mindfulness to really be more present in those activities that we've experienced or the relationships that we have. And once we have that awareness, we're able to put aside that time. How are we going to reflect? And then the P in MAPS is for preference. How do I prefer to practice gratitude? Or if I'm showing gratitude to someone that has done something for me, what's their preference? Is it a public recognition, or is it a one-on-one private conversation? And then the S in MAPS is that specificity, to drill down and really recall and reflect on the benefits that you have had. No questions, value information. What more would participants like to learn about gratitude or other topics of interest? Good, no technical issues. Anything else that you all would like to know about gratitude, or any other topics that, as we look into 2018, that you would like to have more information, whether it's from a research-based or from some applications that we see in work and in our personal lives? Okay, I think that's it. Well, thank you, Dr. Edwards, so much for taking time out of your busy schedule, for sharing the work that you've done and are doing at Humana, and really adding a tremendous component to to our gratitude research on today's webinar.
And thanks so much for the opportunity, and happy Thanksgiving to everyone.
Great. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone.